My name is Nikki Malley, and you may remember me from the last school tour when I was leading this group playing that funny-looking instrument, the vibraphone. This year, we weren't able to come visit you in person, so we are visiting you over the internet to keep everyone safe. But we hope you find it to be just as fun and inspiring as in the past. The Rootabaga Jazz Festival will be on April 16th and 17th with two wonderful groups. There will be a small audience allowed at the beautiful Orpheum Theater for every show, so you can contact the Orpheum Theater to get your tickets. Also, this will be the first year that the whole festival will be live streamed on the Knox College YouTube channel, so you can watch all the concerts wherever you are. Soul Message, a great organ quartet from Chicago, will be performing Friday night and Saturday morning for our Rootabaga Kids program. And many of you will remember alto saxophonist Greg Ward, who led this school tour a few years ago. He will be performing with his group, Rogue Parade, on Saturday night. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the incredible trumpeter, Tito Carrillo, who will be presenting a brief history of jazz for this year's Rootabaga School Tour. He'll be joined by Whitney Ash on piano, Jason Brannon on the drums, and Andy Crawford on the bass. I hope you all enjoyed today's program, and we look forward to seeing you in person next year at the 2022 School Tour with the wonderful Matt Wilson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special virtual presentation I call A Walk Through Jazz History. The purpose of these videos is to give you a glimpse of the rich legacy and history of America's original art form known as jazz. I say original art form because jazz was created and invented right here in the United States of America and has influenced virtually every form of American music ever since, and has expanded its reach all over the world over the last 100 years. But before we get into the music, I want to introduce myself and my fabulous bandmates and let you know a little bit about what we do. My name is Tito, and I play the trumpet. The trumpet is a member of the brass family of instruments, and it's known as the prince of all instruments. It's also one of the oldest known instruments, well known for its bright, brilliant sound that can be heard miles around. The older versions, also known as bugles, could only play a few notes, but they were often used in battle to signal an oncoming threat to the rest of the troops. The modern version of a trumpet has 3 buttons that we call valves or pistons, and they allow me to play a lot more notes. A lot of people think you just blow air to make a sound on the trumpet, but that's not quite the whole story. We produce a sound when we blow air and our lips start vibrating to create this buzzing sound. Can you do that with your lips? There are only 2 parts to the trumpet: the main instrument and this little piece that we put on our mouth, cleverly called a mouthpiece. I have to buzz my lips in the mouthpiece in order to get a sound, and to be honest, it sounds a lot like a duck call. What's amazing is that when you place the mouthpiece into the trumpet, the duck sound turns into this beautiful trumpet tone. And that's how I make music on the trumpet. Now Whitney's going to talk to you a little bit about the piano.
So today I get to talk to you guys about the piano. The piano is a whole orchestra in one instrument. It's got 88 different keys. It's got the lowest note that you're going to hear in the orchestra, and it's got the highest note that you're going to hear in the orchestra too, and all the notes in between. Piano is actually part of the percussion family, and the reason it's a percussion instrument is because there's actually some hammers inside that make the sound of the instrument. Now, if I want the instrument to sustain, there's a little pedal down here that I'm going to put my foot on, and all of a sudden, the piano rings and fills up the whole room. The piano is a really great instrument. It covers so much emotional range. You can play really, really pretty on it. But the same exact instrument can be really kind of hard and aggressive too. So in a jazz band, one of my big jobs as a piano player is to play a lot of chords. And you can do so many different things with chords. Chords are actually just a collection of notes that sound really nice together. And you can play chords that sound really happy, and chords that sound kind of sad, and chords that sound really, really hopeful, and chords that sound really, really strange. And in a jazz band, I'm always trying to find those sounds that are going to make the music have the emotional impact that I want it to. So my job is sort of to color what's going on with the bass and the drums and the horn to make a whole thing happen together. In the olden days, a piano player used to take the role of the bass player and the drummer and accompany, and it would sound something like this. But nowadays, a lot of times when I'm playing in a jazz band, my part by itself is going to sound a little something like this. So that's the piano, and that's how the piano works in a jazz band. And now we're going to have Andy talk a little bit about the bass.
Hi, I'm Andy, and I play the bass. It is also called a contrabass, sometimes a double bass, or a bass fiddle. It's in the violin family, which also includes the viola and the cello, and it's the biggest one in the family. In the early days of jazz, the role of the bass was taken on by the tuba, and when the string bass entered the group, they started playing lines kind of like a tuba. And then as jazz developed, the bass player started taking a more rhythmic role in the group and played a thing called a walking bass line, which combined rhythmic elements and also playing the harmony of the chords. So it really tied together what the drummer was doing and what the piano player was doing. And that's why the bass is the most important instrument in the band. So a little example of walking bass. And to explain a little bit about the drums and the drummer's role in the band is Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason, and I play the drums. The drums have been around forever, for thousands of years, but it was about 100 years ago when jazz musicians decided, hey, what if we put a bass drum and a snare drum and all these cymbals together to make sort of one complete instrument? So in order to do that, it took a little innovation. They had to invent a pedal with a beater on it and a spring so that you could play the bass drum not with your hand, but with your foot, like this. And then someone decided, hey, what if we had some cymbals and we could play them with the other foot instead of having two cymbals with both hands play like this, crash, crash, crash. What if we put them on another pedal on the left side? And so they did that. And at first the cymbals were way down low, and they called that a low boy. And then somebody got the bright idea, what if we extended it way up so that you could also play the cymbals with your sticks? And they called that a hi-hat. So we went from the low boy to the hi-hat. And so once you've got a bass drum pedal and a hi-hat, then you've pretty much got a drum set. So I've got a bass drum way down low. I've got this thing which is called a snare drum. Now, it makes a different kind of sound because, I'll show you this, on the bottom of this drum are these coiled wires. And then I've got this switch over here, which lets me put the snares on or off. If they're off, if they're just hanging loose and not touching the bottom drum head, it sounds like this. It sort of sounds like the other tom-toms on the drum kit. But if I turn on the snares so that they're pulled up tight against the head, it sounds like this. Okay? In a jazz band, what I do is I keep rhythm, I keep the time. Really, everybody should keep time, but when something goes wrong with the time, everyone turns to the back of the bandstand and looks at the drummer. So the drummer has to keep the time, has to keep good time. Make sure we don't speed up or slow down during the song. And then also I provide texture. I can if I do my job right, I can make the music sound more exciting, or I can bring it down and make it quieter. Really, everyone can do that, but I think the drummer can have a bigger effect on the music in that way than the other instruments. The drums are an American instrument, and they've been used in every kind of music since they were invented about 100 years ago, the drum set. In jazz, a lot of the time we play the cymbal. This cymbal right here, which is called the ride cymbal. So I'll play a little bit of time like I would in a jazz band. A hi-hat over here. Rock and roll, rock, hip-hop, you hear the same combination of instruments. And sometimes I hit the cymbal for a crash. So that's about it. I think the drums are the most fun instrument you can play. So back to Tito.
And now it's time to bring you the story of jazz. Once upon a time, there was a town that was known as a melting pot, where people and cultures from all around came to live and mingle with one another. The town is New Orleans, Louisiana, and here you'll find whites, blacks, French, Spanish, and Caribbean islanders, all who brought elements of their cultures with them, including their food and their music. It's Sunday, which is the one day that many, many years ago, slaves were free to meet over at Congo Square to practice the traditions that they brought over from Africa, like the playing of the drums, song, worship, and dance. This is where it all started and where it all came together. The sound of the blues, the rhythm of swing, and the creativity of making up music on the spot, which is what we call improvisation. Can you say improvisation? What really is improvisation? It's when you take a song people know and you add a little bit of the blues and an extra helping of swing to make the song your own. This all began in New Orleans, the birthplace of jazz. The jazz bands in New Orleans around this time consisted of the cornet or trumpet, which would play the lead or the melody. The other horns in the front line were the clarinet, which is a long black instrument from the woodwind family, that plays a lot of fast notes, and the trombone, a member of the brass family with a long slide that could bend notes. Om-beep-ba-da-ba. The New Orleans trombone style is known as tailgate trombone. The rest of the group consisted of piano, banjo, and usually a tuba to play the bass line, primarily because a lot of musical events consisted of outdoor parades and marches. But the bass line could also be played by the upright or double bass. The percussion often included a very simple collection of bass drum and some cymbals. One of the first big names in jazz was Joe King Oliver. Say his name with me, Joe King Oliver. King Oliver was a trumpet player from New Orleans whose bands began to travel the country, bringing his soulful brand of hot New Orleans music. One of his early hits from 1923 was called Dippermouth Blues, where King Oliver used the rubber tip of a plunger as a mute for his trumpet and gave his horn a soulful, bluesy vocal quality. In the early 1920s, he moved up to Chicago, which had become the center of the jazz universe. And he helped a lot of young New Orleans musicians by inviting them to move to Chicago and play with his band. One of these artists was a young trumpeter named Louis Armstrong. Can you say his name with me? Louis Armstrong. King Oliver immediately noticed his incredible talent, his huge fat trumpet tone. In fact, back then, when they would record the band, they would have one microphone in the middle of the room, and all of the musicians would get in a circle to record. Well, Louis Armstrong's tone was so strong, they would have to put him outside of the room down the hallway in order for him not to overwhelm the rest of the band. But in addition to his amazing sound was his incredible fingers, his incredible sense of swing, and his genius-level creativity. He just sounded different from everybody else. On one occasion, he created a trumpet intro to the song West End Blues that became the first jazz cadenza the world had ever heard. I'll play it for you now, followed by one of the most famous New Orleans compositions, When the Saints Go Marching In. Louis Armstrong, who also went by the names Satchmo and Pops, went on to become the very first international jazz star. His mark on jazz and on the history of American music cannot be exaggerated. No one helped to spread the popularity of jazz throughout the country and the world like Pops. Now it's time to turn our attention to the 1930s and New York City, which quickly had taken over New Orleans and Chicago as the jazz capital of the world. But they had a different flavor than New Orleans' style of music. Instead of one trumpet, they expanded the section to include 3 or 4 trumpets. They did the same thing with the trombones. And instead of having just a clarinet player, they expanded that into a section of saxophones. The tuba was replaced by the double bass full-time now. And instead of the 2-beat feel, now the bass would swing playing a consistent line of quarter notes, which came to be known as a walking bass line. Can you say walking bass line? A walking bass line would sound like this. The banjo was also replaced by the piano full time. And this new large group was able to put out a powerful sound that could supercharge any dance hall. This period came to be known as the big band swing era of the 1930s and 40s. And some of the best-known bands were led by Benny Goodman, Count Basie, Glenn Miller, and Tommy Dorsey. One of the most famous band leaders and most important American composers was a piano player from Washington, D.C. named Edward Kennedy Ellington. But everybody called him Duke. The Duke Ellington Orchestra had a long engagement at the Cotton Club in Harlem, where they would play nightly for adoring fans and ecstatic dancers. Here's one of their biggest hits, entitled, "It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing." Hey, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Do-wop, 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 do-wop. It don't mean a thing, all you got to do is sing. Do-wop, 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 do-wop. It makes no difference if it's sweet or hot. Just give that rhythm everything you've got. It don't mean a thing, all you got to do is sing. Do-wop, 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 do-wop. But out of the swing era emerged an outstanding group of jazz soloists who wanted to do more than just play music for dancing. They wanted to focus more on improvisation and write new and original compositions and put on concerts just for listening audiences. So after their dance band gigs, they would head over to a place called Minton's Playhouse up in Harlem for some epic jam sessions where musicians young and old would have to come prove themselves on the bandstand every night. Out of these sessions emerged a young crop of jazz artists with interesting nicknames like Bird, Dizzy, and Monk, and they played a brand of music that sounded completely different than older styles. The new music came to be known as bebop. Can you say bebop? Bebop was what I call the 3 F's: fiery, flashy, and fast. Here's a composition called Whale by the great bebop piano master, Bud Powell. Did you notice towards the end of that tune how the drums was trading with the soloists? We call that trading fours, where the trumpet plays 4 measures of music and then the drums improvises. And it's a cool way of having a conversation with our drummer. Now, along with Bud Powell, saxophonist Charlie Parker, also known as Bird, and trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie led the bebop revolution and changed the course of jazz forever. From then on, jazz would be a music for the concert halls and listening rooms all around the world. From the bebop world, there were a handful of musicians who wanted to expand their music and combine it with music from other cultures. One of the first to do this was the great trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie. Now, even though he co-led the bebop revolution, a friend named Mario Bausa turned him on to some great Cuban music that was happening in New York City at that time. And Dizzy was fascinated with these new rhythms. He wanted to see if they could be combined with bebop and form a new style of music. In 1947, he was introduced to Cuban percussionist Chano Pozo, and the two composed music together that did just that. And we now know this style as Latin jazz. Here's one of their biggest hits. It's called Manteca. Since the 1950s, jazz has gone on to take on many forms and has been combined with musical styles all around the world, from places like Brazil, Israel, and Asian countries such as Japan. Jazz music is truly a shape-shifting art form, able to be fused and twisted and joined with virtually any other style. Yes, there are certain rules that every jazz artist must follow: the ability to swing, the ability to play the blues, and to improvise over different types of songs. But ultimately, the magic of this music is that it leaves freedom for the individual to express themselves, even while being a part of a larger group. Jazz is all about expressing yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, and your whole self. It's about expressing your passion and your dreams through musical sound. Now, here's one of my compositions I would like to share with you, and I get to express myself a little bit. I'm a Latino American who loves jazz and loves Latin rhythms, and you can hear both of those elements in this tune that I call Truth Seeker. to thank you for watching this Walk Through Jazz History video performance. And I would also like to extend a special thank you to the members of this fine ensemble, Whitney on piano, Andy on the bass, and Jason on the drums. I would also like to thank the Rootabaga Jazz Festival and Andy Crawford and everyone at Knox College for inviting me to be a part of this project and for making this happen. Thank you.